Hey everybody, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. So in today's video, I just want to kind of do a very basic introductory piece of information that probably if you've taken psychedelics, you'll at least intuitively understand or maybe explicitly understand. And that's really to discuss the shape of the trip and what you experience at different stages in the journey. For some of you, this might be an important piece of information that you haven't heard before. If you are new to psychedelics, this is probably going to be really useful for you. But again, if you're a veteran, this still may have some value. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. And just super briefly, before we go ahead and get into it here, I want to just introduce myself in case you haven't ever seen me or any of my videos and just give you a little context on who I am and where I'm talking from here. So first of all, my name is Dave. I'm a coach. I'm a hypnotherapist. I work in the psychedelic space primarily here with a focus on helping people with integration, preparation, transformational coaching in between sessions or around sessions, this kind of stuff. So this is my area of passion. This is my area of expertise in a lot of ways, in the sense that I've been doing psychedelics for 30 years now. I've probably got well over 1,000 experiences under my belt. Lots of different materials, lots of different contexts, all of that. And I've been working as a coach for about 8 years now, and studying personal development for much longer than that, and spirituality much longer than that. So if you're interested in any of these topics, that would mean you're in the right place, and I'm honored to have you aboard for the conversation. Okay, enough self-promotion here. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Okay, so like I said, this might be a little kind of fundamental or basic for some of you. And, if you don't really care about the shape of a journey, then, feel free to click off this video. But I feel like this is one of those pieces of information that needs to be talked about, needs to be put out there and offered. And I'd love to offer my own experience, particularly around, why come up anxiety happens. So let's talk about it here so that you kind of know what to expect in terms of the shape of how the drug you take kind of hits you and interacts with you, and what to expect over over the arc of the journey and the experience over the time frame there, right? So obvious thing here first is that when you take a psychedelic, and let's just, for clarity's sake, for simplicity's sake, let's say classical psychedelics. We're talking mushrooms, we're talking LSD primarily, and let's say we're talking oral ingestion here. So we're not talking, some of these other fancy forms of taking psychedelics. We're just talking good old, you ate some mushrooms or you ate a tab of acid or a couple tabs of acid. Okay, so simplicity, just to understand here. So let's say you take the mushrooms, you're probably going to have an onset period that's going to stretch. I would say at the earliest is going to be, you'll come onto it in half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour would be fast. Normal is more like 45 minutes to 60 minutes in that zone is kind of more typical. And then some people, have a much longer onset for different reasons. Maybe their stomach's full of food and it takes longer for the body to process it. Maybe they have an underactivated serotonin system and it takes a little more work to wake it up. Who knows why, but some people experience more of an onset where things really start to kick off more like 90 minutes into your experience. Okay, so you kind of have, let me see, how am I going to do this? I'm going to do this kind of backwards so that it looks forwards to you. Okay, so you kind of have this, you ingest, and you kind of have this come up, right? That's going to be, let's call it 45 to 60 minutes on average. And over that time, you're going to feel shifts and sensations. And this is usually where people experience come up anxiety. Right? Come up anxiety is kind of that feeling that something's shifting in my body. My body doesn't know what to do with these shifts. It's trying to figure out what's going on. And there can be a little bit of fear response or fight or flight kind of response, or a little bit of a panicky, like, oh God, what's happening kind of moment that accompanies that. That's totally normal. I want to speak more to come up anxiety, but let me just kind of say the shape here, then we can kind of break apart the stages more. So generally, you're going to kind of have this, 60-minute kind of come up, and you're going to kind of come on to what is generally somewhere at the beginning of the peak state. Now, one of the things that a lot of people don't really understand about classical psychedelics is that, after that come up period, and once you're really into it, so let's say 60 to 90 minutes in, something like that, you're often going to be at your peak or starting to really peak. So generally it's like you come on, there might be a little acclimation, but usually once they really hit, you're kind of in the throes of it, and you'll be in that peak kind of once it really starts for probably, if we're talking mushrooms, probably 3 hours, give or take. Could be 2, could be, 4, but generally it's going to be somewhere in that ballpark of maybe 3 hours. So you've got maybe an hour come up, maybe 3 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours of peak at most. And then you're going to start to taper off over time. Right. And it'll be like a slow come down where you're starting to realize that you're coming down, you're kind of feeling a little more grounded, a little more relaxed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the general shape. So it's kind of this quick ramp up during that first hour. Boom, you're really in the thick of it, like kind of right up front. And then that's going to shift into like a nice taper off later on. So that's kind of the shape. But here's what to expect during these different phases of your experience. So as it's kind of coming up, like I said, that's generally classically where people get this kind of come up anxiety, right? So it's very normal to feel nervous, antsy, maybe your palms get a little sweaty, maybe your jaw gets a little tight, you get a little disoriented, you get a little kind of like nervous laugh kind of vibe, where you're like a little like uncertain of how things are going to go for you, and that's all very, very normal. I think one of the things that causes come up anxiety. So first of all, it's important to know this because once you really start to get into the kind of peak of your trip, the way you came onto it can very much color and shape how the rest of the experience unfolds for you. So this is all part of the set and setting kind of thing. If your set gets kind of twisted into kind of like a wonky, kind of went sideways on you thing, that can end up impacting the rest of your journey, sometimes for the duration or for just a part of it. It's hard to say exactly, but it can definitely impact things. When you're coming up there, that anxiety, I think, is often just the body's way of trying to make sense of whether or not you poisoned it. Essentially, that there's this moment where the body goes, uh-oh, there's something here that feels different. What did I eat? What's going on? And it's not unlike, like if you've ever had food poisoning, that kind of that moment where your body starts to register, uh-oh, something's not right here. And there's a little bit of a panicky, overwhelmed, like, oh God, kind of feeling. Now, generally psychedelics, that's just kind of this nervousness that if you breathe through, you relax, you settle into, you remind yourself consciously, I took a drug. It's just kind of shaking things up for a moment as it disrupts my normal pattern of functioning. I will be okay. I will move through this. What happens is that once you kind of get into that peak where you've kind of moved from the come up to like really settling into your experience, you settle. You actually start to acclimate and feel comfortable and feel easier. And that initial kind of coming on, it can be like, whoa, I'm really in it. I'm really high. This is a lot. And there's the body sensations, and there's the visual distortions, and there's the closed eyes visuals. There can be just it can be a lot to kind of process. But once you kind of get into it, there's a moment, usually for most people, where it kind of clicks, and it's like, oh, okay, good. I'm good. I can do this. Like this is okay. This isn't so bad, or I can work with this, or this is kind of fun, or this is really strange, but I don't hate it. Something like that. And so you kind of want to work with and breathe through and allow yourself to move through that come up anxiety, because as it settles, as your body acclimates to the new normal, so to speak, a lot of that anxiety goes away. Okay, then you're in this kind of peak experience. Now, in some of the schools of thought that I've studied with psychedelics, the belief is actually, they almost use the metaphor of like a bouncing ball. So if you like climbed up a ladder and you held a rubber ball from the top of the ladder and you let it go and you let it fall and bounce, that first bounce up is going to be the highest bounce. And each subsequent bounce is going to be a lower and lower and lower bounce, right? And so that's kind of essentially how how it's understood what happens when we take a psychedelic. That first bounce, which you could kind of consider when you really come onto the psychedelic properly, that first bounce is probably where you're going to be your highest, most likely. There are exceptions and things can go other ways. And obviously, if you add other substances into the mix later, that changes things. But if we're talking purely psychedelics, that first bounce up is going to be the one that's really the biggest window, let's say, for the deepest, most mystical experience, or the most ego dissolving, letting go, melting into everything moment is going to be earlier on in the experience once you really come onto it. So that's important to know, because a lot of people kind of expect that they're going to have this big experience kind of deeper on into the experience, and they may or may not, but often it's easiest to get there right as your system's kind of making sense of it and it's all kind of settling for you. So you'll kind of, you'll come into this peak experience, and it's just a lot. It's a lot of body sensations. It's this feeling of restlessness and electricity moving through your body, and this feeling of maybe being vividly alive, or your senses are really sharp and subtle, or you kind of have a hard time telling what is your imagination and what's actually happening around you in the environment a little bit, like your hearing is a little altered. And it can be strange, which is to be expected. You took a psychedelic, things get weird, right? That's normal. You're in Wonderland now, and in Wonderland, things occur to you differently. Generally, that experience, again, is going to last. Oh, my camera's playing tricks on me. Is going to last for a good, let's say, again, 2 hours, give or take, where things are going to feel really intense. Often they come in waves. You get really kind of blissed out, or you get this wave of energy, or you get this so much electricity in the body, you feel like you have to go lay down and you're going to melt. And that's all normal. And that would be kind of the direction of going towards an ego death type experience. So you'll have these waves of bliss or ecstasy or life force kind of moving through you. You'll feel like you're melting into things. You'll feel like your mind is gone. It's scattered to the wind. Your cognition is nowhere to be found. You'll feel maybe curious. Maybe you'll be kind of internal and reflective and thinking about new things. Or a lot of times what happens for a lot of people is they end up feeling a lot of life force, and they kind of feel like this return to childhood play and passion and enthusiasm and innocence. And they want to literally go out and explore and play and do things with their body and use all this energy that's moving through them. Very, very normal. I don't really have a strong opinion about that either way, but I will say that it's a wonderful gift to feel reunited with all of that vitality that's maybe been buried inside of us, or repressed or suppressed. And it's really, I think, a good thing, whether or not you're using that for a therapeutic purpose or maybe for something more external and sensory and whatnot. I think either way, feeling vibrantly alive is a beautiful gift. Okay, so that's going to last for a while. And then a lot of times it starts to just like mellow out a little bit, and you go from kind of feeling spaced out and electric and melty and a loss of boundaries or confused or, like all that. And it starts to be, you hit this phase where you feel the boundaries of your body more. You start to feel your hands and your feet and your face, and you can feel your form more. You're not so prone to lose track of the boundary of your skin. You feel it more, but you're still pretty high. Your cognition's off. You close your eyes. You've got colors and patterns and shapes. Your thinking is different. Your emotions are different. Your insights are different. Your way of feeling embodied feels different, but it's starting to feel more embodied again and more grounded again. And that'll last for a while, where you kind of have this window where you're still kind of tripping, but you're kind of more in your body. And then from there, that generally starts to taper down into just a very relaxed, kind of grounded thing, generally. There are definitely exceptions you'll have if you play around with psychedelics enough, where sometimes as you're coming down, you'll be stuck with maybe a somatic sensation in your body that can't seem to go away. Maybe you've got like a sharp pain in your, in your lungs when you breathe, like a tension in your chest, or you might feel like, just like your legs are extra sore, or just things like that. You may end up not always feeling comfortably relaxed, but I would say more on average, what to expect is that you will feel your body kind of relax, get more comfy, kind of get heavy a little bit and relax in that kind of heavy, loose way that you might get after a long day of doing some sort of physical exertion. Like, let's say you went and played sports all day, or you went and worked outside and did some physical labor all day, or you walked a lot, all over the place, somewhere all day. And you kind of have that physical, like, kind of like my body's tired. Right. And that's pretty typical. And you'll have kind of at the tail end of the experience, you'll kind of have that happening for an ongoing period of time with kind of curiosity. Like your mind is back, your personality is mostly back, but there's kind of an activation in the nervous system that makes it still kind of hard to unwind and hard to sleep. So one of the things a lot of people don't understand is when you take a sizable dose of psychedelics, it's very energizing usually. It can often really amplify things, but sometimes they hit you the opposite way and they make you really sleepy and confused and fuzzy and overloaded and overwhelmed and all that. So that's kind of what to expect from the shape of the journey. Now, the reason I'm telling you this and sharing this information with you is that I want you to realize, if you're going to take them, that first of all, that first come up period ends, that eventually you come onto it and you do acclimate, that generally the anxiety is going to hit you at the front end of the trip. And generally, if you're going to get super high and kind of have like a mystical experience, like an ego death experience, or you're going to have like just a feeling of being really altered, usually that's going to be towards the beginning of really coming onto the trip. So I would say somewhere at the 90-minute mark, 2-hour mark, somewhere around there, you can expect that you're going to feel electric and amplified in your most altered. And that's also the great window of time to do transformational work, therapeutic work, healing work, if you're in a psychedelic therapy context. So yeah, just wanted you guys to know that, just so you kind of know how to work with that. I feel like this is, again, one of those fundamental pieces of information that people who are new to the space may not know what to expect, but once you've kind of been through it, you get it, and you're like, okay, that's how that works, and that's how that goes. But this is all important because psychedelics make you feel very vulnerable, very sensitive to things, very open, and so you want to know, where those windows of potential overwhelm are, so that you can work with them and work your way through them, knowing that they will change and pass, that the next stages may not necessarily be as uncomfortable. So enough said. I hope this serves you well. I hope this is useful information. And if you do like this, if this was helpful, do a favor, maybe leave a comment down below. I love interaction here on the channel. Leave a thumbs up to let the algorithm know to share this with more people. And if you like this kind of content, do consider subscribing to the channel. And enough said for now. Much love to you all, and I'll talk to you guys soon.